Welcome students to the penultimate episode of the Company Program podcast. We're on week 17 right now. The end is just in sight, and I know all of us have been working very hard in order to make sure that we successfully wrap up the operations of our company. A lot of what I'm going to say today is just a repeat of things I've been saying for the last few weeks, but let's talk about it again and let me expand on each point a little bit more. The first thing I want to remind you of is the upcoming Business Development Speaker Series. Matter of fact, it's happening at the start of this week. I encourage as many of you to go to this session. I know we have a minimum of 3 people from each team coming, but I'm really hoping to see at least 5 or 6 of you because the information that's going to be shared during the session is so important, and it's coming from experts who know so much about each of these topics. A reminder that the 2 topics we'll be discussing during this session is around liquidation and creating your shareholders reports. Both of these things are your priority now that your operations are just about done. Speaking of which, let's talk about our shareholders reports. If you're planning on competing for either Company of the Year or Shareholders Report of the Year, you have to submit a rough draft of the shareholders report by the end of this week. Regardless of whether or not you're applying, you have to submit your final copy of the shareholders report by the end of next week, week 18. It is a requirement that every student that participates is a part of a team that completes the entire process of the company program, and that includes liquidation and writing your shareholders report. These final drafts of the shareholder report really go hand in hand with liquidation. At this point, a lot of you have been selling off your equipment, your supplies, as well as your inventory, so you don't really have that much left. What we need to work on more now is the back end of everything. We want to settle all of our accounts, make sure there's no gaps in our record keeping, and we want to do all these things because we need to determine the final values for our taxes, our donations, and of course, how much money we're going to give back to each of our shareholders. Next to the shareholders report, the final assignment you have this year is submitting your final bank withdrawal request. When you liquidate successfully and you have all those final values, you're going to note them down and send them in. Again, this is your final request and it's a nice little bow to wrap your entire company up. With liquidation, your shareholders distribution, and your final bank request, this is something that you're going to need to do. While we're talking about our bank accounts, I want to give you all a heads up and a reminder that our bank accounts close 2 weeks after the final week of the company program, which is week 18, which is next week, so it's right around the corner. It's for this reason that it's important we're timely in completing these assignments and liquidating so we can distribute our money to whoever's entitled to it. Last week, our individual scholarship and awards applications closed. What's going to happen on March 11th is if you were shortlisted or picked to be top 5 for whichever scholarship or award you went for, you'll be contacted by me via email. So be on the lookout if you applied for any scholarships and awards. Students who are shortlisted will be required to come in for an interview through a panel of judges. This will be on March 16th in the evening and it's going to be taking place over Zoom. Remember, if you're shortlisted, make sure you dress up a little bit to leave a good impression on your judges. Now, to wrap everything up with the company program, after we're done liquidating our company and doing our shareholders report and all these scholarship applications and so on and so forth, we're going to have a version of the celebration of achievement. Now, unfortunately, this year again, we're not going to be able to do the usual in-person event that we've done in the past. Having a few hundred people come together in a confined space doesn't seem like something we should be doing just to make sure everybody's safe and also to be mindful of any COVID restrictions. Despite that, we still do have something special planned for the celebration of achievement. This will be coming out on the week of March 28th. Now, I know this information that I talked about are things that most of you already knew about. All of you have been so on top of the company program requirements this year, it blows my mind. So we'll take this next bit to do our interview portion. Hi Darren, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. How you doing, Josh?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for joining us today. So as usual, I'm just going to jump in with a general question just to give the students a bit of context of who you are and what your role is. So could you tell me a bit about your own story, your journey, the kinds of things that had to happen to you to get to where we are today?
Yeah, oh, well, you want me to go back a ways? I'll try to condense this, but honestly, Josh, where I first got an appetite to even consider politics was when I participated on an international exchange program. I spent 3.5 months in a small town in Quebec, and 3.5 months in Northern Africa. And on this exchange, which I highly recommend to all young people, it's called Canada World Youth. It really opened my eyes to a number of different issues, whether it be politics and political issues, the economy. I know we're going to talk a little bit about where people can learn more about the economy, and so participating in this exchange, I definitely learned a significant amount about the local economy that I was in, and how it relates and contributes to the national economy and then the international economy. And so really on that program was where I thought of possibly one day getting into politics, but that's where it really solidified for me that I wanted to be a teacher. So I came back from this program and went to university and got my education degree and taught for a number of years. And it was when I was teaching at an inner city school where the students there had additional barriers to what most students would face nowadays. So from homelessness to addictions, to incarceration. But these students were there because they wanted to be, not because they had to be. They wanted to turn their life around. And so I found that really inspiring. But what was frustrating was that the programs they were trying to access, there were significant hoops and barriers, and it frustrated me. And so I thought, instead of just complaining about the problem or about the government of the day, I decided to get involved. And so I first ran in 2008 in downtown Edmonton. I ran unsuccessfully. I came in third place, but learned a great deal about electoral politics and about the political system in Alberta. And then in 2012, I ran again, but worked for 2.5 years going door to door. I knocked on probably 50,000 doors in that time, and was elected in 2012, but I won by 245 votes out of a possible 35,000. So when anybody says, I'm one vote, it doesn't matter, that's completely incorrect. That every vote counts. And so was elected in 2012, re-elected in 2015 with the Notley government. I served as the Minister of Economic Development and Trade for 4 years. And then in 2019, we lost government, but were elected official opposition. And so I now serve as the critic of economic development and innovation.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, that's great. I had a brief description of again, like your journey as we talked about, but that's really interesting to hear all that it took. And I think that's a very inspiring attitude to have, of instead of just complaining about things, we need to kind of stand up and do it. And the students in the program at this point, that's exactly what they did. They identified a problem, did something about it, and now they're just about wrapped up here. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, Deron. Now, just focusing a bit more on Alberta and our economy here and how things are set up. I know with young people, and I'll admit even with myself a little bit, sometimes it can just seem like a lot, and it's really hard to gain that understanding. So hopefully in this episode of the podcast series, we'll have a deeper understanding of how everything works. To begin with, could you tell us a bit about our economic history? How did Alberta's economy become what it is today?
Yeah, great question. And it's a fascinating story, Alberta. I mean, people will see if they drive out of any of the cities that we have rich, vast farmlands, whether it's growing agricultural crops or, our pig farms to cattle farms. Agriculture used to be Alberta's primary economic driver. And it wasn't until, investments in our oil sands, and I'll give a little backstory on that's where the Alberta economy really catapulted forward. And so starting off initially, Alberta and Saskatchewan were almost identical. And it wasn't until Alberta's oil industry boomed that Alberta moved much quicker as far as economic growth than Saskatchewan, that remained primarily agricultural. But the real impetus, or the reason that Alberta jumped forward, was actually because of government support for our oil sands. Way back in the day, obviously very, very expensive to try to find oil. And it really was almost as bad as shooting in the dark. They didn't have the technology that we have today to know where to drill and how far down and et cetera. And companies would go bankrupt trying to find oil. And so there were programs the government of Alberta introduced. There were also programs the federal government introduced to support the development of our oil sands. And honestly, From there, things snowballed. But I can tell you that, the other really important part of Alberta's economy is the role of our post-secondaries. Alberta has 26 universities, colleges around the province, and we have some of the most world-renowned universities. The U of A, for example, the U of C, that attract incredible researchers who then attract teams of people who then provide profile to a program, and students will say, wow, I really want to go there. I'll give you a really quick example. At the U of A, we have something called AMI, the Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute, which does machine learning and artificial intelligence. AMI is ranked third in the world. We are ranked third in the world, and most people have no idea it exists at the U of A here in Edmonton.
That's
and
amazing, yeah.
Yeah, and so we have a lot of students that want to, if they think about artificial intelligence and machine learning, they think, yeah, Edmonton is the city, and the U of A is where I need to go. So, I mean, we've been predominantly oil and gas, but to be fair to other industries, Alberta has had a thriving forestry sector. Agriculture continues to be our second largest sector in the province. We have a robust tourism industry, and of course, we're seeing now with technology and again the knowledge economy, a growth of other industries that contribute to the Alberta economy. So long and the short, we're proud of our roots as far as being oil and gas, but we are not a one-trick pony. We have many different sectors that we excel at.
Yeah, no, that's amazing and great answer. I won't lie, I was a bit selfish when I asked that question because I wanted to know myself. I think a lot of Albertans, of course, there's that stereotype that's attached to our province of oil, right? Oh, that's oil country right there. And the funny thing is, a lot of Albertans, I was born and raised in Calgary. I've been here my whole life. That's what they think too. They don't actually look and see at all the diversity we have here and all the different opportunity, which is amazing. I didn't know until right this moment that the AMI program existed just about 3 hours north from where I am right now. So that's really good to hear. And then also, when we're talking about the history, seeing the different perspectives on it, again, something else that is new information to me is the government support for oil. I guess I never thought too deeply about how oil was first discovered here in Alberta. And then kind of moving along to the present day, again, just with the AMI program. And I know we talk a lot about technology here. And it seems as if that's at least one path for us moving forward, one industry where we can grow in technology, which is very exciting. And there is a lot of potential here. There's a lot of great things happening in Alberta. If that's the case, you personally, have you seen any examples that you could share with the students of exciting new companies or ideas popping up in the technology area, or even just other industries in general?
Yeah, no, listen, we have a number of great examples of what they call unicorns that come and kind of coming out of Calgary, including Benevity. But there are others that I think we have a very thriving, they call it an innovation ecosystem. And it's just a fancy way of saying the reason it's an ecosystem is that everything affects everything else. So there's a role for our post-secondaries, our private sector, to the public space, and everything in between. And so we do have a number of very successful Calgary companies. Did you know, for example, that one of the founders of Uber is actually from Calgary? The company Uber is actually born out of Calgary.
I had no idea. This is news to me. I'm learning just as much as the students are right now. Yeah.
So, for us, and maybe Josh, this jumps ahead a little bit, but I think we have incredible opportunities in Alberta. And I think, if you were to ask me what is Alberta's greatest resource, it's not oil and gas. Rachel Notley describes it as it's walking around on two legs. It's the people of this province that are our greatest resource. And so that's where I'm a big fan of programs like Junior Achievement that provide young people with some skills and concepts that maybe aren't necessarily being focused on in the K-12 system as it stands today, but that are absolutely critical. And I'd love to see more young people become entrepreneurs and take their creative ideas and let's turn them into companies, into products, into solutions that will solve real world problems. And so I think Calgary has a really supportive community of people that will invest and inject money into these new companies that we need to get them up off the ground. And so that's part of the ecosystem. And then there's incredible training programs for startups and companies. So for me, I think, you know what, we can come up with solutions to world problems right here in Alberta, and Alberta is one of the best provinces to do it.
No, and it definitely is. Again, I think you're highlighting something important there. With we were just talking about what kind of future can young people expect out of Alberta, and technology is just one example, right? And having that ecosystem that you described, I think we can describe a lot of things that way that we see here. Everything is connected to everything, right? If something positive happens here, it'll happen over here too. And I know, in the high school age group, the students watching this right now, they might feel some of those anxieties of, oh no, this isn't the place to be. I need to go either out a bit more eastwards, because that's where we have to be for these opportunities. That's where we have to be to become somebody, or move down south to the States. And even in my age group, I'm a few years out of high school now. People in their early 20s, even late 20s, they kind of feel this too. But it really is just about kind of looking for those things and seeing those opportunities where they're present, I think is the important thing. And I really agree with you. I love that sentiment that Alberta's greatest resource is not oil, it's the people here. And that really is something special, and I think is uniquely Albertan. Then again, I might be a little bit biased. But I guess kind of adding on to that, this is kind of going off the script here of what we talked about. But in terms of the opportunities for young people, kind of in high school, or transitioning a bit out of high school, are there any specific opportunities that you see that young people can access to kind of further explore this innovation ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, junior achievement is a great start. So first of all, give yourselves a pat on the back for voluntarily participating in a program that is looking at giving our students and young people another tool to put in their toolbox. And you look at, everything that you guys at Junior Achievement do, you cover a variety of different topics and skills. So I think that's really critical. I think that there are programs like Mind Fuel, programs that are trying to attract more women into like the science and technology and math areas. I think as well, once people graduate, I feel like it's important to, and people can gain experience by just having conversations. So I know later we're going to talk about how do you learn more about the economy? How do you increase your financial literacy? And to be honest, I went from knowing very, very little to being the minister responsible for the economy in Alberta. And I had to learn a great deal very, very quickly. And yes, I would read as much as I could. But honestly, for me, it was about talking with people and learning about their business and what they did and how it works, to learning about the different sectors. Alberta is a leader in life sciences, in medical devices, in a number of, I could give you stories of some of the cool things companies are doing in nanotechnology, which is amazing. But the stories are there, and so really it's just a matter, I think, of young people going out and being inquisitive and trying to understand how things work and asking good questions. But I think that there are programs that are available. Again, check out the Government of Alberta website, check out the Government of Canada website. What for programs that people could potentially participate in. I'm confident that if a young person approached a tech entrepreneur and said, "Hey, can I follow you around for a day, or can I learn a little more about your company?" that they'd be more than willing to share. And that's something that's really, really cool about Alberta, is that our entrepreneurs and innovators are actually a tight-knit community. And instead of when you think about capitalism and it's based on competition and companies are fighting each other for every dollar, What's really interesting is in the tech innovation space, they all want to see each other succeed. So it's not a zero-sum game. They don't look at it as the pie is only this big and we have to share it, and with the fewer people, you get bigger pieces. It's not at all. It's almost like we're creating wealth. We're creating jobs that are going to support each other by supporting each other, by encouraging each other. And so that's something that I also think is uniquely Albertan.
Yeah, and that's very exciting. It's in the company program, and it's something that at this point the students have already gone through and incorporated into their own companies. But looking at the angle of, I guess, social enterprise and corporate social responsibility is very important. And we're talking about the economy as a whole. And the word capitalism sometimes, you have a negative association with capitalism, just as sometimes you might have a negative assumption. I did it again, a negative association with oil. But again, it's just kind of seeing what you have, and I think with young people, it's very exciting to see the potential of what you could make out of that, how you could turn that around, and even go as far as saying changing the province, changing the world. So yeah, that's great. And I really appreciate you sharing that, and also going into some of the tips, things that high school students can do to take the next steps moving on. From the first day, I've said that it's incredible to me that we have this many students who took that initiative, took that first step into being into this program, and that alone is an accomplishment. And throughout these 14, 15 weeks, students, you had so many more accomplishments, so many other things to celebrate, so many more successes. And how do you keep on moving forward from that? And that's great. And I guess, unfortunately, Darren, we just have to wrap up here slowly. So just to ask one final question, I guess, again, it's a bit off the book, a bit off the script, but to you, I know you have lots of specific stories that you can share. You mentioned one with nanotechnology, whatever it might be. From your experiences, could you share one exciting story, something that is uniquely Albertan, something that happened here, something that you think the students would think would be amazing to hear?
So I'll think of one company that was born out of, it's a couple doctors that got together and they developed, now I'm blanking on the name, but it is a machine that can take a person's organ.
Okay.
That is, so again, let's say somebody needs a transplant. Okay, they need a kidney, they need a new pair of lungs or whatever. There's very few people. You need that exact match, right? And not only do you need the exact match, but you need to find someone who's got a kidney or lungs or whatever in really good condition, because you're not about to put, an elderly person's lungs into a young person, right?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, they developed this machine that takes an organ and regenerates it, rejuvenates it. So it takes it from, let's say it was operating at 30% and takes it back to 70%.
Yeah.
And now they can use that in transplants. That was developed here in Alberta.
Okay. Wow.
Which is really, really cool. I mean, there's a ton of life sciences examples. I can give you a really quick example in oil and gas. A company out of Calgary called Hi-Fi developed a pipeline monitoring. Imagine a microphone that looks more like a cord that runs the length of a pipeline. Like I'm talking, it can go hundreds, if not thousands of kilometers.
Mm-hmm.
This sensor is a microphone and also acts as a sensor so that if ever there's a pipeline leak, they can detect it in minutes and shut it off. But the other cool thing is, pipeline may be 10 feet underground. If two people were standing on the surface having a conversation, they can hear the conversation. Wow. And so it increases pipeline security as well, because if people are thinking about, meddling with it, they're going to be caught on audio.
Yeah.
But that technology, again, that can be applied to more than just pipelines, but that was developed here in Calgary, Alberta.
Wow. And see, that's amazing. I think the pipeline example is interesting. That's like 2-3 birds with one stone. And the regeneration that, I know it's a bit more complex than that, but when you use that word regeneration and talk about, that being applied to human beings, it's something incredible. And it is amazing to think, and it's inspiring, it's motivational to see that all happen right here in the same place that we're standing. And for me, I think another exciting thing is that, in 10, 20 years from now, when someone asks that question again, what actually happened here in Alberta? What's exciting going on here? What are some of the cool things that are happening? It's going to be some of the students that are watching this podcast today that are going to be fronting all of those initiatives and pushing all those ideas and doing all those amazing things. And I think that's very exciting, and I think that's something to look forward to. But anyways, thank you so much, Deron, for taking the time here to give some insight and share your perspective on our economy, where it was, where it is now, and where it could go in the future. I think it was very insightful, if not for the students, definitely for me. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Josh. The one thing I just want to add real quick is I appreciate you saying, some of these students might be in 20 years from now, the ones coming up with these breakthrough technologies or companies. Mm-hmm. But where I disagree is that there's nothing stopping your students, these junior achievement students, from developing these companies and these ideas today.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Look at some really successful entrepreneurs that are under the age of 18, that their companies have been extremely successful. And so anyone who thinks that you have to be a certain age before you or have a certain credential or get a degree before you can come up with with a unicorn company, that's completely false. And again, I'm a big fan of education. It opens doors for sure. But my message to your podcast viewers are, like, you can design, develop, and build that global changing business right now. You don't need to wait.
Well, no, 100%. You know what? Absolutely right. And I apologize because, like I said, students, it's amazing that you're here today, that you're in this program, that you're watching this episode here. You're trying to learn more and grow more. And there is nothing stopping you from, once again, taking that first step, as you already have done. So thank you for adding that, Deron. Any final thoughts or words that you'd like to share with the students?
No, other than, congratulations. And you said it earlier, Josh, that what can students do? Well, I would say that your podcast viewers have already taken one, if not several steps by being a part of junior achievement. And I think that's awesome. Let your curiosity guide you and keep asking questions. And honestly, when I talk to entrepreneurs as far as how did they come up with an idea, it's because of something so simple like the history of Uber was that they were tired of waiting for a taxi that they couldn't get, watching all these cars pass them, thinking, well, what if anyone potentially could be a transportation carrier or a taxi? And so that's where the idea came from, which is brilliant. Look at Airbnb. People who are like, well, I have an extra bedroom, or I'm not using my house. Why can't people stay there? Why is the only solution hotels and motels? So anyway, all this to say, if you look around or you hear yourself, catch yourself saying, God, I wished it was different for whatever reason, well, maybe you have an idea for a company.
100%. There's a million reasons not to pursue something, not to develop something. Ignore all of them and pursue the one for why you should. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
And that was the interview portion. As you've probably guessed, I'm going to quickly do a recap of everything we talked about that we should keep on our minds as we head into this week's meeting. We have the third and final session of the Business Development Speaker Series coming up. I encourage everybody to come attend this session. It's only 1 hour long, and trust me, that 1 hour is going to be impactful. You're going to learn so much and take away everything that you need to know to finish off this year strong. We should also be making steadfast progress on our shareholders report. The final draft is due at the end of week 18, so we're getting really close to that deadline. For those that apply to individual scholarships and awards, just keep in mind these next two dates. Shortlisted applicants will hear back by March 11th, and if you do get shortlisted or placed on the top 5, you should be ready to come in for judging, which will take place on March 16th. And of course, we want to focus on liquidating our companies. If you're still operating, you really should stop at this point. Focus on selling all of your assets, and if you're on track, you've already done this. We want to make sure that we're making all of our final entries in our books and accounting for everything we've done so far. If you're having any difficulties with these processes, be sure to ask either your mentors or reaching out to me directly to make sure you're on the right track to do these things. And that's all for this week. I'll see you all next week for the final Company Program Podcast episode.